Okay, Boker Tov and Shavua Tov. We continue our learning about Rav Kook, and this shiur is Rav Kook Bet, although really it's Rav Kook Gimel, but according to the topics, then it's Bet. Why it's Bet? Because the first topic that we learned for 2 weeks was about Rav Kook before his Aliyah, when he was focused mainly on questions of how to see the different point of views, the different movements, we may say, in the world in general, in Yahadut in particular, and should we oppose them? Should we try to find the light? Right, we spoke about visioner, Kook, about seeing. We spoke about Re'aya, that is the acronym, the Rashi Tevot of his name, about seeing, about him being a visioner, and about being able to identify the light, meaning the spark of truth that is enlightening every type of a worldview, which again is not, if it's not something that belongs only to one lunatic, but something that is big, something that is massive, that there are masses of people that believe in for a long time, there must be some spark of truth in it. Doesn't mean that the whole thing is correct, but there is some spark of truth that we need to adapt. And we need to adapt A, because it is truth, and B, because it's a better way of fighting opposing worldviews instead of trying to completely diminish them, which would not happen, because if they exist, it means that they have a place of existence in life. So if you really want to fight a different worldview, do not try to destroy it. Try to adapt the truth of it. And then the people that follow it would see that you have what they have and more. And they would follow you. So, or even as a strategic, he believed it that just to be the right thing to do. But I am adding that even as a strategic move, it is a better way of dealing with opposition than trying to wipe it out, which almost never succeeds in this world. And if it does, it's in great prices. So that's what he was mainly dealing with in his time in Chutz La'aretz, and we spoke about him becoming a Rav in Zmiil and later in Boisk, and we spoke about the tragic death of his wife in a very young age, and then he marries her we say cousin, the name, okay, cousin, yeah, he married her, and his former father-in-law is making Aliyah because he becomes the Sgan Rav, the Aderet. Remember, we had a shiur about him. So the Aderet, Rabbi Eliyahu David Rabinovich Teomim, he becomes the Sgan, right? The second in command in the Rabbanut in Yerushalayim, because he was supposed to replace Rav Salant, who was very old at the time of Shmuel Salant. As you may remember, in the end, Rav Salant outlived the Aderet. But the Aderet was supposed to replace Rav Salant, and he goes to Yerushalayim. And for the time being, Rav Kook remains in Boisk, which is the second city he was Rav in Lithuania. And he became the rabbi there in Boisk in 1895, and there is where we left him in our last meeting. Now, around the year 900, we don't have the exact date, but around the year 900, comes to Boisk a very special, 1900, yes. Come to Boisk a very, someone that is a very important guest, and that is Yoel Moshe Salomon. Some of you may be familiar with the name. I think the most famous thing he did was to establish Petach Tikva, for which he also was ascribed into a song about Yoel Moshe Salomon. But he was a man of many deeds. That's only one thing that he was involved in, and maybe for him, I'm not sure that even the main thing that he was involved in, he also was very highly involved, engaged in the Yetziah Min HaChomot, in establishing the new shchunot outside of the walls of old Yerushalayim. Was a very important mission for him. And also with the basic revival of the התיישבות, of the settlement in Eretz Israel, and he is one of the leading figures in what was later came to be called Aliyah Rishona. Now, he was not Aliyah Rishona. He was a child of one of the families that made Aliyah when the Gra sent his students to Eretz. The family of Solomon, Shpachat Solomon, is a very important, to this day, a very important Yerushalmic family. However, he was involved in the establishments of the Moshavot, the agriculture Moshavot in Eretz Israel. He was a very dati person, and that's who he was. Now, he went to Lithuania for his own personal needs, and there he happened to come to Boisk and to meet this new young rabbi sitting in Boisk. And Rav Kook made a great impression on Yoel Moshe Salomon, especially because of his open mind. Because Yoel Moshe Salomon understood that as the Jewish settlement in Eretz Israel is expanding in number, but more important even in the type of people that come in, because you have what was called the Ishuv HaYashan. Now, the Ishuv HaYashan, just to be straight, was not so Yashan, was not so old. We speak about the students of the Gra being the foundation of the Ishuv HaYashan, so that's only 100 years at the time that we speak about, not more. But however, they saw themselves as the Ishuv HaYashan, as the people holding to the old traditions, and you have the people that are beginning to come in. Many of them are religious in the Aliyah Rishona. So when you speak about the 1880s, the 1890s, many of them, the majority, I believe, were what we would call today observant. The whole labels thing, of course, is completely anachronistic. But we would call them today orthodox or observant. And Petach Tikva and Rishon LeZion and Ekron, all of these places were established by religious people. And with the help of the Baron, the Rothschild, we spoke about all of that in previous shiurim. But new people are beginning to come in. Because the movement of Chovevei Tzion, for example, which was, now that is precursor, that is before Zionism as a political movement, that is before Theodor Herzl. And Chovevei Tzion had again, what we would call an orthodox wing, but also had a very non-orthodox wing. Such persons as Echad Ha'am, Asher Ginsberg, such persons as Pinske, others, people that, not Pinske, Pinske was religious, but the name, I have forgotten the name, but he was the Maskir of Chovevei Tzion, which I cannot remember right now. But also a very important Zionist, Chovevei Tzion guy, which was completely Chiloni. And as a matter of fact, although, again, it's very difficult to put numbers, but we may assume that the majority of the Chovevei Tzion, the simple members of the Chovevei Tzion were observant. The managing team of Chovevei Tzion were sitting in Odessa, and they were mainly non-observant. And non-observant is a very gentle word. They were maskilim of the warrior type. However, they tried to keep peace in order for Chovevei Tzion to somehow work, and it is to be admitted, they also hoped that they would be able to influence the masses, and they saw the Aliyah to Eretz Israel not only as an opportunity to save people from the pogroms of Eastern Europe, which was very important goal, but also as establishing a new Zion, a new political entity for the Jewish people, and a new Jewish person. The new Jewish person would be strong, would be courageous, would be working his land and not only Lufthansa, and also he would be secular. So not everyone, of course, in Chovevei Tzion agreed to this mission, but many of the leading voices, and that caused many frictions within this movement. So these people are also coming into Eretz Israel. And Yoel Moshe Salomon understands that you need a very special rabbi in order to lead these different types of groups of people coming into Eretz Israel. And when he meets Rav Kook with his open mind, with trying to identify the spark, this light, this orot, as he would call them later, in every person and every movement, was just, Solomon believed, the exact match, the shidduch that he was looking for. So he kept to himself this meeting with Rav Kook and returned to Eretz Israel. 2 years later, in 1902, the old rabbi of Yafo passed away, Rav Halevi, Rav Naftali Herz Halevi. Now, Rav Naftali Herz Halevi belonged to the Yishuv Hayashan, and in Yafo, there was a move from the issue. Many Jews were, as I said, making aliyah, coming in, and many of them, as happened in every place almost in the world, when Jews are coming in, they have this tendency to stay in the place where they landed. Right? So the concentration of Jews in the USA, where it would be? In New York. Right? Why? Because, well, it's very convenient. You just come in and you just stay. And so many Jews that came to Eretz Israel just stay in Yafo, because that's where they landed. I mean, obviously there was no nutbag, right? So you came by ship and you came to Yafo. So they landed, they came down from the ship into Yafo and just stayed there. And so Yafo, its Jewish population was booming very, very rapidly, very quickly. And not with the Yishuv Hayashan type of people. Even when observant people came in, they were different in their nature than the people of the Yishuv Hayashan that stayed in Yerushalayim. And Rav Halevi was a very gentle type of person, so he was somehow able to hold these two extremes. And also they respected him because he was old and he was there before them. But now that he passed away, you cannot bring another, just a regular Yishuv Hayashan type of rabbi to Yafo. That was clear, at least to people like Yoel Moshe Solomon. Obviously, there were people from the Yishuv Hayashan that did want to enforce the old school type of rabbi, but everyone with his eyes in his head understood that that is not going to do any good. So Yoel Moshe Solomon is looking for a figure that would be accepted by the people of the Yishuv Hayashan, but also on the newcomers. And he remembers this guy, this Abraham Isaac Kook, that he met in Boysk. And Rav Kook enjoys many advantages. A, he is an Yishuv Hayashan figure, meaning he learned in Mwoaloz'hin. He is a Lithuanian from A to Z, right? He ticked all the right boxes. He's a Lamdan, he's a Torah scholar, he's a tzaddik, he's everything. He is the son-in-law, at least the former son-in-law, of the Aderet, who is the chief, the supposed to be chief rabbi in Yerushalayim. Who can be more Yishuv Hayashan than that? It's beautiful, it's excellent. And also he is open, he is gentle, he is exactly what we want, says Yoel Moshe Solomon. He is able to convince the committee, that was the search committee in Yafo, that they want to invite Rav Kook to become their Rav. And indeed, they asked the Aderet to be the middleman in this negotiation. The Aderet, very interestingly, the Aderet he thinks it's a great idea. Obviously, he's very happy that his former son-in-law would come to Eretz Israel, and also you'd help me now. So the Rabbanit Rivka, the wife of Rav Kook, the second wife of Rav Kook, is the daughter of the twin brother of the Aderet. So she is his niece. Yeah, so he would be very happy to have his niece and his former son-in-law coming to Eretz Israel. And he thinks it's a great match. He has also no problem with the match, but he is worried. He knows from his own personal experience that they are not going to pay Rav Kook enough to live. And you remember that the Aderet lost children because he was not paid enough and he was not able to stand over the money issues. So it's more difficult for people like that to stand for themselves. It's easier for them to stand for someone else. So he is making very hard negotiations on the salary of Rav Kook, and it's very interesting. Rav Kook he was very far from arguing about money. Rav Kook, he was one of these type of people that does not know me. That you give him a coin and he doesn't know what is its value. So it's the Aderet making the negotiations, and he's able to secure for Rav Kook. No one would become a millionaire, right? But he's able to secure to Rav Kook something to really be able to provide to his family and to focus on his work as a rabbi. He would not need to be in constant search for another source of income. So he's able to secure that, and Rav Kook signs the contract and is invited to come to Yafo. It will take another 2 years of these negotiations, and then till he would come. Also in Boise, they didn't want to let him leave, and they sue him. They told him that he owes them money for the house that he was renting there. So it became a complicated story. In the meantime, I thought it would be interesting to read with you a testimony that we have from a rabbi named Rav ניסנבוים. Now, Rav ניסנבוים was an important Rav of the Mizrahi, a very thoroughly Zionist guy. So he's part of the Mizrahi, and he writes an autobiography, and he writes about his meeting with Rav Kook as Rav Kook was still in Boise before coming to Yafo. It is interesting because it tells us about Rav Kook before he became the Rav Kook, and it's very interesting to read about that. So it's in source Aleph, Rav ניסנבוים. את שם רבי אברהם יצחק הכהן קוק שמעתי זה כבר. So I already heard about Rav Kook. When I was young, I read his article in the periodical Knesset Israel on נציב מוואלוז'ין, and I liked his words. I also wrote his words from the עטור סופרים. Do you remember that he printed a newspaper, a periodical, in which he hoped that it would be a stage that he would be able to gather to different rabbis, that was called the עטור סופרים. Said I also liked what he wrote in עטור סופרים. שמעתי עליו, I heard about him, כי השקיע עצמו בלימוד הקבלה, that is immersed in Kabbalah. You remember that he began to learn Kabbalah in earnest after the death of his first wife. הוא מתנהג בחסידות ובפרישות, so he's behaving in חסידות. חסידות here doesn't mean the best. חסידות means that in a very high halachic and moral standards, and in prishut, so he's separated from the enjoys of this world. אורח הבא אליו מעיר אחרת, when a guest comes to him from another city, הוא מאכילהו ומשקהו, he gives him food and drink, ובפרדו ממנו הוא תוכב לתוך כיס בגדו של האורח פרוסת לחם. So when the guest departs, he gives him something to go with. הוא מלווהו 4 אמות מחוץ לביתו, so walks with him for 2 meters, 4 אמות, I guess that more outside of his home, 4 אמות is just a term. לקיים מה שאמרו לו, פטרנו בלי מזון ולוויה. So that is in order that he would be able to say, I gave him everything that I could, right, when he left me. אבל התעניינות מיוחדת, לא התעניינתי ברב זה. But Rav ניסנבוים said, but, okay, I heard about him, he was a nice rabbi, but I was never too much interested in him. Nothing unique about רב קוק. בתנועת חיבת ציון ואחרי כן בתנועה הציונית לא השתתף. He was never a member of חיבת ציון. This, as I said, was the pre-Zionism movement. And when Herzl has established the Congress הציוני and the Zionist movement, he never participated. He was not a registered member of the תנועה הציונית, which is very, because we are very used, I think, to think about Rav Kook as the Zionist of all Zionists. But he was not even a member of the הסתדרות הציונית. ספרים חשובים עוד לא חיבר. He didn't write, meaning we spoke about the books that he did write, which was the book about the tefillin and some drasha book. Nice books, but again, nothing unique. That is not something, we would not have been speaking about him for the 3rd shiur now in a row for what we have spoke about up till now. מה לי ולא? So Rav ניסנבוים writes very candidly, says, what do I have to do with him? I mean, I'm a Zionist. I believe that the way forward for the Jewish people is Zionism, is making Aliyah. And he's a Rav sitting in Boise and, okay, doing whatever he does. אמנם הייתי מתעניין גם במתנגדי הציונות, כי חפצתי לדעת את מקור התנגדותם. So Rav ניסנבוים says, to be honest, I was interested not only in Zionist rabbis, also in anti-Zionist rabbis, in order to understand why do they oppose Zionism. But Rav Kook was not even that. He was not in favor, he was not opposed. את הרב קוק לא חשבתי כלל למתנגד, כי אלמלא כן אמרתי לא היו בני בויס כמו שווים אותו כיסא הרבנות בעירם על מקומו של הרב חובב ציון אליו רב מרדכי אליסברג. So there's a political calculation why Rav Kook cannot be completely opposed to Zionism, because he would not have become a rabbi in Boysk, which was a more Zionist city, if he was not at least not vocal opposer to Zionism. Fine. I skip a few sentences. אולם בראשית שנה זו, 1904, I was informed כי הוא מתקבל לרב ביפו. And when I heard that he is going to be the Rav of Yafo, and we have to understand, Yafo is not only now the biggest, competing with Yerushalayim on being the biggest Jewish city, now Yafo is also the center for all of the new settlements. That the city that if you live in Rishon LeZion or in Petach Tikva, all of these new settlements, where do you shop? In Yafo. So becoming the Rav of Yafo is not only the Rav of Yafo, it's the Rav of all of the new settlements. So that's a very important position to anyone that is Zionist to understand who is this new rabbi. So he is going now, this Rav ניסנבוים is going out of his way into this Boysk city to see who is this Rav Kook that they bring in. And he says, שהייתי בעיר בויסק 3 ימים. So I went to Boysk and I stayed there for 3 days. ובכל יום ישבתי שעות אחדות בבית הרב. And for a few hours a day, I sat in Rav Kook's house. Now, I would say it in just me saying that, not him, of course, and not Rav Kook. I think that Rav Kook, you can see how hostable he is, right? How much he is hosting. Meaning, someone comes and sits for a few hours for 3 days. If someone would come to my, I would maybe give him a bed and a breakfast and maybe even lunch. I don't have time to sit with him for 3 or 4 hours a day, with all due respect. So it's I don't know what Rav Kook was engaged with throughout the day, that he was just able to sit with this newcomer, right, this guest, for a few hours. I'm just saying it's interesting to see that, A, I think the Chassidut of Rav Kook, and B, also the tempo of life. That's also very important, I think, to understand. In these small cities in Lithuania, you sit and you learn Torah. If someone comes, you speak with him, you speak 1 hour more, 1 hour less. It's so interesting to see that just as from the human perspective. Now, I close this box and we continue. So if you are, it's caught my attention that he's sitting there, just sitting for a few hours in Rav Kook's home, for every day, for 3 days. ושוחחנו על עניינים שונים בהלכה, בהגדה, בשאלות החיים. So we spoke about everything under the sun, right? הלכה, הגדה, questions of life. ראיתי לפניי לא רב רגיל, ההולך בדרך הכבושה לרבים, כי משרוח הסולל לו דרך לעצמו. So I understood, I see not a regular rabbi walking in the regular path, but someone that is making his own way. Now he says, את הדרך עוד לא מצא. And it's the young Rav Kook, right? He says he didn't yet find the way, the path. But he is looking, he is not walking on the king's road. He is trying to find his own way. מחפש הוא אותה, he is looking for it, בכל אורכה, רוחבה ועומקה של היהדות. So he is looking for it in all the width, the length, and the depth of יהדות. צולל הוא בים התלמודים. He is diving into the sea of Talmud, of the Gemara, the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, the Midrashim, the philosophy, the Kabbalah, the חסידות, וגם בספרות העברית החדשה. And he reads Berdichevsky, he reads Berner, he reads Peretz. We know that. He would later, it's too early yet, but he would later read Agnon, would become a close friend of his. So he is immersing his, why? And again, because he sees in every aspect, in every phenomenon of the Jewish life and basically of human life, a spark of God. It doesn't mean that it's correct. It doesn't mean that we have to follow it. But there is something to learn from everyone, anywhere. So he reads everything. פעם אחת שאלתי אותו, אדוני הרב, מתעתד אתה לעלות לשבת על כיסא הרבנות ביפו ובמושבות יהודה? My master, my rabbi, you are going to come to the throne of the רבנות of Yafo, but not less in all of the מושבות, the settlements of יהודה. Now, יהודה here is not what we call today Judea and Samaria, יהודה ושומרון. יהודה means ארץ ישראל. שם תעלנה לפניך שאלות חדשות שאינן בגולה. You did encounter new questions that do not exist in חוץ על הארץ. שאלות היישוב העברי החקלאי, agricultural questions, does not exist in חוץ על הארץ. האם שמת לבך להתעסק בהלכות התלויות בארץ ולהתעמק בהם? Did you notice that? Do you find time to engage into this question? Now again, if Rav Kook was me, if it was myself, I would say maybe I would have time to engage these questions if people would not come into my house and speak with me for 3 hours a day. But again, so he was a nicer person. So Rav Kook says yes. He answered yes. ולא רק בהלכות התלויות בארץ, not only the הלכות התלויות בארץ, כי אם גם בהלכות התלויות במקדש. I also began to learn the הלכות of בית המקדש. I am a Kohen. So we see even in this very small exchange, we see here how futuristic his view is. בדברנו פעם אחת על יום טוב שני של גלויות שאיננו שומרים בארץ ישראל. So a hard question for everyone sitting around the table. את יום טוב שני. So they began to speak about יום טוב שני observance in ארץ ישראל, and people from חוץ לארץ coming and going back, and these are questions that we get all the time. דיבר הרב ארוכות על ערך העבודה. ועל ההתאמה שבין התורה והחיים. So he doesn't say how exactly Rav Kook's have sailed from inyan le-inyan, from one subject to the other, but I would guess that Rav Kook spoke about in Chutz La'aretz, where engaging in the world, in the external world, is not an holy value. Then you can make another second of Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is the only way to connect with God. But in Eretz Israel, going to work is also a way of connecting with God. So the second Yom Tov in Eretz Israel is Yom Chol, is going to work. So Rav Kook explained to him that there is a value to work, ערך העבודה. in ארץ ישראל. ועל ההתאמה שבין התורה והחיים. So Torah is not something that is divorced of life, as in חוץ לארץ, where being a Jew means, in certain extent at least, to divorce yourself, because everything outside is threatening. So you need to close yourself from everything outside. That's what second Yom Tov symbolizes.
Was there some issue with second day Yom Tov then?
It doesn't say. So how can I know? We know that the reformers were trying to abolish second Yom Tov. That's already. Abolishing second, I don't know. I can guess. But second Yom Tov was almost the first target of the reformers in Germany and later in the United States. And I would guess that Rav Kook was aware of their attempts to abolish second Yom Tov. And I guess that they were speaking about the questions of second Yom Tov also because he's going to become the rabbi in Rav in Eretz Israel, then questions of second Yom Tov are in stake. מתוך שיחה ארוכה זו נוכחתי, so Rav ניסנבוים tells us that he became aware by this long speech that they had, long talk that they had, כי הרב עמד על דרך התפתחותה של היהדות. The Rav Kook sees the way that היהדות has developed throughout the ages, והכיר גם את המקום בו נפסק הקשר בינה ובין הדעות החדשות. He also sees where it had been disconnected from the development of new opinions, new ideas in the world, because again, the Jews have to close themselves, and this process of closing in only became stronger and stronger as the outside world became more and more secular. So we know that the Khatam Sofer, about whom we spoke half a year ago, so he coined the term, and he took it from a halachic use into a hashkafic use, and he coined this term Chadash Asur Min HaTorah. Everything new is not allowed. חדש אסור מן התורה. And Rav Kook, as you can already understand, was of the complete opposing view. Chadash is not something that is asur. Chadash is something to adapt. However, and here we begin to see how Rav Kook, and he didn't do it up till now, at least not in writing, he begins to see that his project of reconnecting Yahadut into the world can only come to life. There is only one place where it can happen, in Eretz Israel, where Jews would become their own people, would control their own fate, would sit on their own land. There you can reconnect. Because if you try to reconnect in the diaspora, in a foreign land, you would connect to things that are incompatible with the Torah, with Yahadut, with Halacha. I am saying that now as a side point, but a few years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, then I don't think it's a problem, I would say it. YU had a slogan in order to recruit money or to recruit students. And they said, the slogan, I cannot even remember the exact words, but it was something to the effect of Torah and Mada, it can only happen here. And now, I understand why they write that. Obviously, they are the largest university in the world that combines Torah and Mada. But to be honest, I think, and in that I guess I am a student, as in a sense, all of the Yahadut Zionit here in Eretz Israel, all of the Dati Leumi is a student of Rav Kook. It can only happen here. You can do very interesting things in Chutz La'aretz, but be completely loyal and be a whole Jew, not American and Jew, not X and Y, but a whole Jewish person. That can only happen here in Eretz Israel with all the conditions. I mean, it's not only the ground, it's not only the land, with all the social and political conditions and cultural conditions that surround it. I don't think that even now we are there. We are in a process of going there. But I think Rav Kook began to understand. Now, I cannot put my finger on which year he began to connect all of these dots. His openness, his understanding there is truth everywhere, his understanding that in the theological field, his understanding there is a spark of God in everything, if that can be said, right? But when God created the world, if something exists, it is somewhat, in the most twisted way, but somewhat connected to Hashem. Otherwise, it would not exist. There is nothing else but Hashem. So everything that exists in the world must be in some way connected to Hashem. And you can, if you would be deep enough, if you would be learned enough, if you would be secured enough in your Yahadut, you would not be afraid to send your hand and pull in also that spark. But you understand that all of these dots are connected and they can only be implemented in Eretz Israel. And that's what he says to Rav ניסנבוים. Then that is the project with which he began his journey towards Eretz Israel in 1904. Okay, so that was the introduction to our shiur, the first part. Because now we begin to speak about what I wanted to speak about, that is his period, his time in Yafo, and we would speak this shiur to the best of our abilities from 1904, in which he came to Yafo, to 1913, which is, of course, the beginning of First World War. And that would change the life to change the history of the world, of course, and with it, the life of Rav Kook. So Rav Kook comes to Yafo in Kafchet Iyar, 1904. Kafchet Iyar would later become the day of Yom Yerushalayim. So it's very interesting. His Aliyah is marked in Kafchet Iyar. And it's also the year 1904 is also important in Zionist history because it is being seen as the year marking the beginning of Aliyah Shniya. As I said earlier, Aliyah Rishona was composed mainly of observant Jews that didn't come necessarily with political Zionism idea, but more about settling the land and running away from the pogroms in Eastern Europe. And now they may have some political motivations, but very far away, not something that is immediate. When we speak,
the Russia.
that's right. That's right. It has to do with that. It's not necessarily the war itself, but when Russia lost the war to Japan, which was a huge shock for them, because how can we, the Europeans, lose to these Asians, right? How can it become? So someone has to be blamed. Now, I would give you just one guess. Who should be blamed for the defeat? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Not the corrupted Tsarist regime, not the intolerable condition in which the serfs were held, which caused them to hate the state. All of that was not the cause. The cause was the Jews. And so pogroms began and continued. And they were, to some extent, they were led by the government, because the government found that as a good way to ventilate the anger of the mass. Now, there is nothing new in what I'm saying here. We are, to this day, we are seeing this phenomena. So that was what was happening there, and that's right. So Jews were leaving Russia, but now these Jews coming in Aliyah Shniya. Now again, what we are saying now is generalizations, and there were thousands of Jews coming, maybe tens of thousands of Jews coming in Aliyah Shniya, different stripes and types. However, the leading force, at least the way that it came to be remembered in the formal Zionist historiography, is that the Aliyah Shniya was made of people that were socialist, very strong socialist, and also very political. So these were people that came in order to create a new society, which would hopefully also be managed by a new political entity, and would be very secular and very atheist, but also very Jewish.
Very nationalistic.
Very nationalistic, that's right. That's right, very nationalistic. That is, I mean, again, it's a very complicated issue, because socialism and nationalism do not go hand in hand so well. You're right, it's if someone wants, there is a beautiful book about that written by a woman biographer, I think it's called Hayona וכתלמיד, I cannot remember, but she describes very nicely the process in which nationalistic socialism took over universalistic socialism among these people of Aliyah Shniya. David Ben-Gurion was a main player in this drama, but it is connected to what we're speaking about, but I cannot relate to it right now. So these people were very strongly in favor of Jewishness, but secular Jewishness. Now, the issue Vayashan didn't know how to eat that, how to digest that. What does it mean? Being very Jewish, but also very secular. Isn't that an oxymoron? But these people didn't think like that. People like Ahad Ha'am that we've mentioned earlier, they believed, they were extremely secular. These were people that learned in the yeshivot, but they threw away what they learned. They wanted to keep the culture. It was said, half-jokingly, that this type of people would sit after the chulent on Shabbat and learn the nice daf Gemara with a cigarette. This was the type of people. So they liked everything that, many things that had to do with Yahadut, but they were completely atheists. They didn't believe in Allah, they didn't believe in anything. And they are coming in. So these would be the people that later would make it, for example, the kibbutzim. If you know we just had Shavuot. What would you do in a kibbutz in Shavuot, at least in the first half of the 20th century, and into the great extent to this day? Bikurim, that's right. So they take the idea of Bikurim, they do a complete chilul hachag with that. So, horrible in halachic eyes, but in their eyes, very Jewish. It is not something coming from a different culture. How do you relate to that? So the answer, the orthodox answer from the Beit Midrash of the Khatam Sofer, from the Hungarian type, but also from Rasha Hirsch type, The answer would be, that's reform, that's completely changing Yahadut, that's emptying the inner value and keeping the external shell, and we want no share in that. We see that as a twisting and as a chilul, right? Desecration, right? Desecration of everything that we stand for, of everything that is holy.
So this issue we face today as well. It's a national issue.
Again,
It's an issue that we face in Israel.
to this day, for sure. Yes.
Say that maybe the word atheistic is too strong, because many of those people they believe in God, but they don't want to do it in this technical way to halakha. But it's not that they're atheistic.
That's why sometimes we're deistic.
If they would be, they would do anything. It's not this type of like communist atheism. It's more like they connect with something, but they don't want to put it into the halakhic way.
You're right. So again, it's very, very complicated. Echad Ha'am, right, is not similar to Brenner, and he's not familiar to Berl Katzenelson, and he's not familiar. Each one of them has his own ideas. These are all of them, it's a fascinating period in which ideas are bubbling, and people fight for ideas, and they are willing to die for ideas. Now, it came to the Second World War, so all of us, I think, are now much more hesitant to call a human ideal and to fight and to kill for it and to die for it. But in that time, idealism, all these different isms, right? So I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, and again, to the extent that you are aware of what was happening in Eastern Europe of the time, to us, socialist and communist and social revolutionist, literally more or less is in the same basket. They were fighting over the finest details in fighting, and not only mean over newspapers. I mean, killing each other, literally. And some of these disputes also spoiled into Eretz Israel. And even in the kibbutzim, you had the people that supported the Lenin line, and you had people that supported the Trotsky or the Stalin's line. And kibbutzim were splitted over that. Now, if we would be honest with ourselves, looking into the Orthodox world, we see things that are not very, very different. That's the obsession over small details that Freud was speaking about, the narcissism of small details. When you think that everything that you think is so important, that every small deviation needs to be disciplined and demolished. Anyhow, so Rav Kook comes to Yafo. And in Yafo, he would write 8 big notebooks, which are not books in the regular way that we speak about books. These are more like spiritual diaries in which he writes his thoughts in a very free-flowing form. This is Joyce Ulysses, before there was a Joyce Ulysses, right? This is a type of a conscience flow. And he just writes, and I think I described last time that sometimes he would write and the page would be out of the page, would continue to write on the table. And we have testimonies for that. So that was the type of again, it was spilling over. And what is the first thing that he writes after boarding down from the ship in Yafo? I don't know in what day it was, but I guess it was in the first days. Look at source bet. So that is, it's called the Shmona Prakim. Shmona Prakim, it should be Shmona Kvatzim. I apologize. Shmona Prakim is something completely else here. Shmona Kvatzim. All right, so these are the 8 notebooks. And that is the first notebook and the first paragraph, Aleph Aleph. The first thing we assume he wrote in Eretz Israel. חיים אנו עם הציורים הרוחניים שבהשאיפה של נשמת האומה. I hope that you can sense the pottery, but also the difficulty of just understanding how the words relate to each other. So I will try to translate to the best of my ability. It says, we live with the depictions, with the drawings, but it's more of depictions, the ציורים הרוחניים, the spiritual depictions, שבשאיפה של נשמת האומה, which are the aspiration of the spirit of the soul. בכל מקום שהניצוצות של אור הללו גנוזים הם שם, הננו מקושרים בקשר של נשמה של חיים, כל הווייתנו אליו. It says everywhere that these sparks of light from the soul of the nation are hiding, they are gnuzin, we can relate, we can connect the spirit, our life, our being to the spark. בין שהיה זה מקום ממשי מידת ארץ, so it can be just a geographical place. Eretz Israel. If you are connected to Eretz Israel, and Eretz Israel has this spark, because it's Eretz Israel, so it's this Israeli spark, and the Israeli sparks mean a connection with God, because the Jewish nation, the Israeli nation, is the nation of Hashem. And if you are connected to it, then you are, maybe through different lenses, you are connected to Hashem. בין שהיו מעשים, so it may be a geographical place, it may be actions, deeds, שאלו הציורים כמוסים ביסודם, these depictions, these ideas, these drawings are in the root of these deeds. So you may not connect these deeds with Hashem or with anything divine. You just want to be in Eretz Israel and to build, as I said, a social חברת מופת, as they called it, right? A light unto the nations of a social society. Says Rav Kook, in your heart, you are a believer. Not just a believer. You are a follower of Hashem. Because this inspiration you have of building a just society, from where did it come? Directly from God. It is part of the Torah. Now, it is truth. It is not all of the Torah. You do not put tefillin. You do not have arbaat aminim. There are many ideas that you are missing, and Be'ezrat Hashem, you'd collect them also. But we shouldn't see someone that speaks about being Jewishness without the religion as someone that is twisting Yahadut. We should see him as someone that is connected to Yahadut in a different way. Now, saying that, again, it's not pluralism. Do not be mistaken for a second. It's not saying it is acceptable, it is legitimate, but it is saying it is a step. And maybe it is a step, and here I reconnect to what we spoke earlier, that they take because we cannot. We, the observant people, for 2,000 years are sitting in the Galut, and we do not go to Eretz Israel and create a social, just society. Why is that? Oh, we can, there's something to be studied, of course, and he has his ideas about that. But for us, what is important now is the people that are connecting through there cannot be right now observant, because we were not able to extract from the Torah the political and the social dimensions. This is just a fact. It's a fact, right? For 2,000 years, we were not able to do that. So if someone wants to do that, he has no other way but to unload Torah and mitzvot. And again, Torah and mitzvot is the wrong term, but the traditional view of Torah and mitzvot, and to connect to this Torah of mitzvot, of creating the Jewish entity and creating social justice. It is also part of Torah. It is not, unfortunately, it is not our part of Torah. If we would be wise enough to contain within ourselves also these desires and ambitions, they would not need to look for Trotsky or for Marx for their social inspirations. But unfortunately, we are stuck only with the arbaat aminim. And we do not understand that arbaat aminim are only, as he says here, they themselves contain a spark. If we would be able to trace this spark to its source, we would understand how it is connected to all of these great ideas. But instead, we are only interested in the na'anuim. Now, that is not chas v'chelek to diminish the importance of the na'anuim, but is to understand that if you do not connect the na'anuim, these small acts, if you do not connect them to the great ideals, then you would lose everyone that is interested in great ideals. And these people, you are not going to buy them with some sentimentalism of the minhagim of their parents. That's not where they are. They are looking for truth. They are looking for justice. They are looking for making the world a better place. What do you have to tell them? sit and learn another Daf Gemara? It's not an answer. It can be an answer if we would be able to learn Gemara properly. Go and daven, it can be an answer. If davening would fill us with the energy and the force and connection with Hashem that causes us to make this world a better place. But if it is not like that, if all that we can say to them is asur and mutar, and a milchik spoon that fell into a fleischig pot, then that is just not going to do anything for them. That is a revolutionary paragraph, saying that you can connect to the Jewish nation and through it to God, even not through halacha. Now again, I would have to emphasize it again and again. That's not chas v'chayla to say that that is enough in any sense of the word. And he would say later many times, you deteriorate that it is a dangerous path. Because if you take Jewish nationality and would not connect it to the spiritual side, what you may end up with would be the same nationality that the Russians, right, they show and demonstrate in the beginning of the 20th century, even to this day, right, in which
I don't think it's possible, because even if you look, I'm since I speak Russian better than I'm looking at Russian station, and every time all politicians, you know, secular, that they don't care, and everybody finish. Baruch Hashem, we are good. You know, somehow it's a, like as I said, Yiddish spark inside of you. You know, like you somehow you connected to it.
Yeah, you're right. That's what Rav Kook is saying. But he says, but if Chasre it would be completely divorced, you would end up with a chauvinistic type of nationality, which would be a disaster. It would be a disaster. It would be no different than all other national sentiments and feelings in other nations, which brought the world into the disaster that Rav Kook saw in World War I, and later into even a greater disaster of World War II, into which he did not live to see. Okay, we are out of time, and we only spoke about the day of his coming down of the ship, right? But I think we spoke about a few very important elements. Let us try next week, because I do want to finish with, I don't know if it's possible, but I do want to try to finish our learning of Rav Kook before I go out to Miluim in the 10th of July. So what I would ask us is to make a special effort in the next two meetings and to do begin at 9, excuse me. So let's make the coffee at 10 minutes to 9 and begin the shiur at 9. Okay, that is my humble request. And I would try to finish, as we finish now, exactly at 10. So thank you so much, and we will continue with Hashem next week.
You know what is interesting, especially in the lecture, we the less harsh.